bomb explodes again in the headlines of the world. President Truman announces an atomic explosion detected somewhere in Russia, 3 years ahead of the schedule expected by the West.
America's nuclear monopoly was over. Then came China.
Tragedy overtook China. Armed and equipped by Russia, red hordes brought ancient Cathay to its knees. At the end of '49, all China sags under the red yoke.
Communist leader Mao Zedong took over. America's Chinese allies, the defeated Chiang Kai-shek regime, fled with their followers into exile.
Americans have always had, most Americans, a special feeling, a special attachment, a special interest in China. So it seemed incredible to most Americans, uninformed Americans, that this country which we had lavished so much care and affection on, who we thought was so friendly, so many of their people had studied in America and so on, should turn communist, turn over to the other side. Many people felt that there had to be some explanation. There had to be some sort of a conspiracy, some sort of a plot.
Republican Senator Joe McCarthy blamed traitors in the State Department for the loss of China. He launched his own witch hunt.
Today, the most dangerous enemy agent is not so much concerned with the secret information about weapons as he is with infiltrating the necessary departments of the government and shaping and controlling the actions of our nation, so that the enemy is progressively winning without even firing a single shot. Now, I intend to name names. John S. Service. And remember that name, if you will.
I have never knowingly transmitted any information which was, shall we say, secret military plans.
Service was hounded out of the State Department.
I had trouble renting homes, renting an apartment in New York. And the companies, well, what did our stockholders say, you know? So the companies that I had known and had dealings with abroad, export companies, they said, sorry, we think you're a fine guy, but we don't dare touch you.
President Truman tried to dismiss McCarthy's attacks.
Not a single person who has been adjudged to be a communist or otherwise disloyal remains on the government payroll today. We're not going to turn the United States into a right-wing totalitarian country in order to deal with a left-wing totalitarian threat.
But leaders of the American Communist Party were jailed, and the persecution spread. Left-wing labor organizations were banned, radical groups indicted, demonstrations broken up.
And if they put the word commie on someone, that meant that that person was an agent of the Soviets. That meant that that person was dangerous and had to be done away with.
The FBI under Edgar Hoover uncovered several Soviet spy rings. They used the national interest to justify any method of locating subversives.
We were using the same methods that Hoover accused the Communist Party of using, and that's getting people to spy on their friends. And this was one of the criticisms he had of the Communist Party.
I felt guiltless. What had I ever done wrong? I'd never even gotten a traffic ticket. And here I was called before, in public, a state Senate investigating committee about my beliefs. I felt very, very wronged, and I felt that I had to not only uphold myself, my reputation, but that of my fellow teachers, my fellow union members, my fellow citizens.
We would talk to children, if they were in college, about their parents, and we talked to parents about children, and we talked to the neighbors about those people, and then if someone did seem halfway sympathetic in the Communist Party, we talked to them.
It was totally damaging to what we deeply believed America was supposed to stand for.
In the 1952 presidential election, General Eisenhower, the Republican candidate, chose the red-baiting Richard Nixon as his running mate. Eisenhower mocked the Democrats for being soft on communism.
The future of this country belongs to more courageous men. It belongs to men who know that freedom's fight must be forever, relentless, uncompromising, and fair. It belongs to men who, today, are ready to bear spiritual and intellectual arms against an alien army of communist ideas.
To get elected, Ike needed the support of Joe McCarthy and his right-wing followers.
I spent about half an hour with the general last night. Well, I can't report that we agreed entirely on everything. I can report that when I left that meeting with the general, I had the same feeling as when I went in, and that is that he's a great American, will make a great president, an outstanding president.
Right from the beginning, he detested Joe McCarthy. McCarthy was the first-class demagogue, and Eisenhower just couldn't stand that type of person.
Eisenhower's old wartime commander, General Marshall, was accused by McCarthy of treachery. Intimidated, Ike dropped words praising Marshall from an election speech he made in McCarthy's home state.
He was roundly criticized for that, because it seemed to indicate that he was influenced by McCarthy.
In 1953, two Americans, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, were convicted of spying for the Soviet Union. They were sentenced to death. They had young children, and their fate roused protests in America and across the world. For some young lawyers, the sentence breached the Constitution. They sought judges to get a stay of execution.
Judge Frank looks at us, and he says something that we have never forgotten. He said, "If I were as young as you are, I would be sitting there saying the same things you're saying, arguing the same points you're arguing, making the same argument that these planned executions are invalid. But when you are as old as I am, you will understand why I cannot do it." And he stands up, turns his back to us, walks away, and we're devastated. We began to sense something which in later years we understood so clearly, and that was that Jerome Frank, as the leading liberal judge, was terrorized himself and frightened by the atmosphere of fear in the country. That if he, as a liberal, would do something to save Julius and Ethel Rosenberg's life, he would be charged as a commie.
The Rosenbergs were executed.
He died quickly. There didn't seem to be too much life left in him when he entered behind the rabbi. He seemed to be walking in a cadence of steps, as if keeping in time with the muttering of the 23rd Psalm. She died a lot harder. When it appeared that she had received enough electricity to kill an ordinary person and had received the exact amount that had killed her husband, the doctors went over and pulled down the cheap prison dress, a little dark green printed job, and placed the placed the stethoscopes to her, and then looked around and looked at each other rather dumbfounded and seemed surprised that she was not dead. And she was given more electricity, which started again kind of a ghastly plume of smoke that rose from her head and went up against the skylight overhead. After 2 more of those jolts, Ethel Rosenberg had met a maker. She'll have a lot of explaining to do, too. Thank you.
McCarthy now denounced leading Republicans and even senior army officers as communist sympathizers. But he had gone too far. Political opinion swung away from him, and his enemies gained courage.
The names of communists. You say to the army.
You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
It all sort of came to pieces. And then there was this move to censure him, and he fought that very badly. Now, a number of us were advising him on how to handle that, and he agreed to everything we said, and then he did just the opposite.
You have been here trying to snare the staff of this committee. The young men who have been working to uncover communists, you jump up and run away without answering.
McCarthy's power collapsed as the politicians walked away from him. But the spirit of McCarthyism, the smearing of dissent as communist treason, stained American democracy for decades.